You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Are you guys just singing it poorly, or do I just not know this song?
I'm singing it okay. Kessler, a little loose at the end there.
I think I have a different ending to that song in my head than the real one.
I don't even know what song that was. I was trying to sing along,
It's
but
the
Sanford and
theme
Son theme song. Yeah, they sing it all the time in Scrubs as well.
Yeah, that's where
how
I
I
got
know
it.
it, yeah.
It's like on my top 2 most stuff in your head songs of all time.
Wow.
Well, guys, how's it going? Welcome to an episode of the Command Zone, your number one destination for all things Commander related. Today we have a special guest, but first, my name is Jimmy Wong.
How's it? It's Josh Lee Kwai.
And we've got Alex
The birthday
Kessler.
boy.
Birthday,
And hey, welcome back to the Command Zone. This is your guest host, Alex Kessler.
That's right. You guys may know Alex from the Masters of Modern. We shout him and Ben Bateman out every single episode at the end.
We shout you guys out every episode, kind of twice, because we do it like right before
Really?
we talk about things, and then we do it at the end.
Wow.
So you guys only do it once.
Let me put it.
But
But we
I'm
have
so
twice
sad.
as many episodes.
Oh, right.
Ooh,
True,
there you
true,
go.
true.
So
True.
At a certain
we're
point.
equalized at this point, but we're falling behind rapidly.
Yeah.
If you didn't know, it was Alex's birthday recently. In fact, yesterday. Happy
Yay.
birthday, Mr. Kessler.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
I am now a year older and a year wiser. No, I don't know. I feel exactly the same.
Yeah, that's usually what happens.
Everyone's like, "Oh man, you're that age where you start feeling super old," and I'm like,
30?
"No, 28."
Oh.
No, you got 2 more years to
No,
get
no.
to the age that
But
you
like,
start feeling.
even then, I feel like I'm so young at heart that I'm never gonna have to worry about that problem.
True, you are a true child at heart.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you guys a story about turning 30, because I was once your age, and I remember thinking, like, these 30-year-olds, they don't know. No.
Josh.
Like, it'll be fine. Everyone
Mr.
was like,
Adult.
yeah. Then you turn 30, and you realize, oh, this sucks. Just wait.
As
Just
easy
wait,
as that.
gentlemen. I'll come back to you in a couple years.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. We'll see how much it does suck.
Well,
No,
not just...
I don't want to know if I want to get on a podcast about like the crippling anxiety of being in your 20s.
If we're
No,
still
just like, enjoy it while it lasts.
in 2 years, if we're still doing the CommandCast, I will be very happy and impressed.
Me too.
I mean, I've
2
never.
more years. 2 more years.
So it's not just your birthday,
Yeah.
but also
The Modern Pro Tour.
the Modern Pro Tour. So this must be like one of the great weeks of your existence.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, it's like magical Christmas. Star Wars is back. Modern Pro Tour is around.
It's
My
your
birthday. I really can't complain about anything happening.
You're on
in
the
last-
command
I'm
zone.
on the command zone.
This is our birthday
What's
gift
the
to you.
release? So we're recording this now.
This is Thursday,
On the 4th.
the eve of the Modern Pro Tour, but when people are listening to it, it'll be Tuesday. The Pro Tour is over, so why don't you give us a recap of how the Pro Tour went?
So
Yeah,
I mean,
this
it's
is good.
crazy how well that one player did when he played that other guy in that spell, and then I'm really sad that PVD
Wow, just
didn't make
hedging
it
your-
all the way
hedging
in
your
there.
bets
and
here.
the fact that Team Eureka had a pretty decent finish. Also, the
And that
Eldrazi deck.
that one crazy
Yeah.
deck that
oh
nobody
yeah, no
saw
one saw
that-
coming.
yeah.
Like everyone thought Eldrazi was gonna just be it, and then that one deck, all those cards were legal in Modern forever. No one found that deck before.
That crazy. That guy
Insanity.
can brew.
Yeah, no,
That's all I'm saying.
Turns out bribery is a real card.
Make sure to listen to our episode where we at least tried to get the winner and or some of the top 8 players to guest on the podcast right now. They
if
come out
you-
on the same day as this one. If you're listening to this one, you should listen to that one too.
Oh yeah. If you had to make one big prediction going into the weekend, what
Now
would it
that
be?
the weekend is over,
Now that the
Eldrazi
weekend's
Mimic's
over.
going to be the card that everyone's like, oh, right, that's a card, and it's insane because you get to play it for free off of Iavugan.
And what's the combo here? Is it just turning into a 4/4?
You turn 2 that, turn 3 play Reality Smasher, get in for 3, and then turn 4
Get in
Insanity.
for 3.
No, you get in for 7
10.
or 10.
2
because
reality smashes.
No, not Reality Smasher. Sorry, Matter Reshaper.
Matter reshape.
So you play. So turn 0, you play Iavugan, or turn 1 Iavugan into Mimic. Then turn 2, you can play
Matter
a
Reshaper.
3-drop
Shaper.
And then turn 4, you reality smash.
Reality Smasher, because that's when you can tap.
Seems
move
good
in
with
and
that
other
Mimic.
Yeah, no, it's insane. That deck, I'm super worried about it.
All right. That's good
All
to
right.
know. Eldrazi, by the way, a fan favorite in EDH. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Oh, Tron won't make the top 8.
I can agree with that. I think Tron's in a bad
There won't
spot
be a
right
single
now.
copy of Tron in the top 8.
Tron, I'm going to say Tron, it's looking okay to maybe, possibly, but maybe not make the top 8.
That was so vague. You're hedging your
There
bets.
is a chance.
That was my hedge in the beginning.
Yeah, there
I'm
you go.
being
I don't
definite
know.
about
Listen,
things.
this is not the Modern Zone. I don't know much about Modern. I only
The
know.
modern zone.
There was a moment where the Masters of Modern podcast was going to be the Modern Zone. When I thought like the Zone was going to be the branded.
I
Rocket Shop
remember
Magic
talking about
thing.
that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was like, we don't have to be that. tied together. You guys could have like a name that,
Sure.
Is cooler.
We
So
just-
now you're masters.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would have been zoners.
Yeah,
Zoners.
you guys are like, I imagine you as the characters of the show. What's the show where they traveled through portals a lot?
The video game
Sliders from the 90s, which is a callback. And we're more on we're on a mountaintop and like
You guys are
monastery monks
Yeah,
that
there
are
you
like
go.
people come to with questions.
Yeah,
and
that's like
there's
the
mist.
it's like you climb the mountain and you get to the monk, but you can ask any question in the world and the monk will answer it, but he can only answer it with one word.
yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
deep.
So we're like the Jeskai. You guys are planeswalkers.
Okay,
All
I'll
right,
take
I'll
it.
take
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take it. Speaking of Jeskai, we had a little bit of a snafu, a rules snafu.
Oh, right. I was like, where are you going with
last
this?
episode? Yeah, well, because Narset is Jeskai,
Yep.
and
Okay.
so we were
It's like,
talking
that's a segue.
about
Yeah.
the card Preacher, which was one of Craig's pet cards, and we said incorrectly, we're redacting what we said, that Preacher gets around hexproof. Now, it's a little bit complicated because Preacher does still target a creature, and even though your opponent chooses the target, you're still in control of the effect. So hexproof does stop the Preacher effect. So it doesn't work on Narset, which is why the Jeskai, awesome segue.
Yeah, the Preacher is still sweet, however.
Still a
And
good card.
This card's still awesome.
It's
Great
just-
art, straight out of an anime, unfortunately.
I'm sorry if you went out and bought a bunch of Preachers so that you could take care of the Narsets so there are problems in your play group. I'm very sorry.
Yeah. Instead, just buy a...
Wrath of God.
yeah,
that's
there you
it.
go.
That's
Or
good.
what's a
Fleshbag
Preacher,
Marauder.
Preacher, if it worked on Narset, would just, they have to get the creature back before they can do anything.
Sure.
And the best part is they would have to choose it. They would have to be the one that'd be like, yes, you get my Narset.
But we don't want to have any cards out there that are really good against Narset because then Narset wouldn't be quite so broken, right? So let's not. I'm not
Counter
very-
Isn't there
spell.
like the
Not
lantern?
better.
Can't you lantern and then use Preacher to steal her?
Sure, but then there's 2 cards. It's way harder than one.
Yeah, but one's a land. Lands are free.
Just Fleshbag Marauder her, guys.
Yeah.
Y'all are
Speaking of pet cards of
crazy.
Alex Kessler,
Fleshbag Marauder.
love Fleshbag.
That's my nickname for you,
No,
Alex.
I really don't want that.
I
to be
call
my
him
nickname.
Fleshbag Kessler. Bless you.
Well, he's allergic to that nickname.
No,
Clearly.
No bueno.
All right, let's move on to our main topic today, folks. It is improving your deck. It's something that we talk about a lot on the show, and we sort of nebulously talk about it, and we never really focus on what it means to improve a deck, specifically in the case of taking a deck from V1 to V2, if that makes sense. It's one of the most important parts about EDH. You can't just assemble a deck and just decide, all right, it's good forever, because you get to play it a few times. There's a lot of testing and stuff that needs to go into it. And Alex Kessler is here, and he's brought his Meren of Clan Nel Toth. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
No, you have to say it like this. Meren of
Meren.
Clan Nel Toth.
I'm okay with that.
That's
Accept that. I mean, I'm really afraid now because I prepared a whole podcast on awesome dance moves that you can do.
That's not a good podcast
That's not- yeah.
subject because you have to see it.
That's
you
true.
could teach people through music.
So we're going to talk about how to improve your deck and sort of basically taking the leap from V1 to V2. And Kessler, you have done this with this deck, correct?
So yeah, there's an interesting story about where this deck came from that I realized once the subject matter was told, and this deck was the one we're going to play with it, and I can explain away.
Go for it.
Please do.
All right, so my first EDH deck was Teneb, way back in Time Spiral Block.
Teneb the
Ish.
Harvester.
Teneb the Harvester, which is a green, black, white reanimator deck that dredged a lot and put a lot of cards in their graveyard.
These are sort of like the Elder Dragons 2.0. Between
Yeah.
him and Intet and
Yeah,
all the other
yeah.
guys.
But they did the allied ones in a set that I didn't play for, and then they did those during Time Spiral to kind of show the mirror image, blah 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 blah. But that deck has existed forever, and then I had Nath, which was a deck that was really unfun for everyone because Nath's job was to make it so all of your cards weren't in your hand anymore, and then I slowly beat you by being a green-black grindy deck that did nothing while you had no cards in hand.
It's the most Kessler thing ever.
Kessler does love hand disruption.
And like doing a bunch of stuff that doesn't win.
Right.
All right.
Yeah,
eventually
yeah.
Anyway,
wins.
continue.
So I realized when Meren came out, I was like, oh, great. I can change this deck. And I have, you guys might know this, but I have one of every of the 2 color pairs
Right.
of decks. So Meren was Nath was my green-black one. And then I also had a weird green-black-white one that I've just had forever that I never took apart. And I kind of smushed them together.
Because you already had a lot of the pieces then.
Yeah, because Meren, like, Teneb was all about Graveyard Reanimator Dredge shenanigans. Nath was all about green-black value, sacrificey, get there stuff. And so the 2 decks kind of smushed together into a very adorable Irish apparently.
And it is
Commander
fitting.
deck.
No, Scottish. Because if it's
Scottish.
not Scottish, it's crap.
Well, it is nice because Meren is standing in front of a dragon-esque creature, so it is as though you put two creatures together, a dragon and a human.
Yeah.
There you go.
The world came together.
So this is probably something.
Nath is a elf. Before anyone shoots me, sorry.
He is an elf.
I was about
it
to
makes
shoot
elf
you.
warriors. So do we? I mean, how much do I? Oh, because you guys have the video. So okay, I don't have to explain what Nath does. Or do I?
Yeah, it's fine if you know what Nath does. That's great. If you don't, it's not key to the story. This is probably a process that a lot of people are going through right now because the Commander product came out. A lot of us built decks. And then right around this amount of time is when I find myself with Mizzix, with Mazarek in the same spot where it's like I've played it a few times.
Yeah.
And so now I'm ready to make tweaks further from like what would be the version 1 of the deck.
Right.
And
version 1 for a lot of people is also just straight out of the box.
True.
Which is great.
That's true. Yeah, that totally counts, right? It's like whatever is the deck that you play with for a little while, and then your brain starts going, well, that card's not any good, or man, I wish the deck could do this, and blah, blah, blah. And so the process of tweaking the deck so that version 2 is better, and then version 3 maybe, and I don't know how far people go. I'm usually done around version 3 or 4.
You don't just continuously tweak forever because I feel like I get to like maybe two
yeah.
versions, and then from that point on, it's always like I play one game, I'm like, oh, that card's way worse than I thought, or that card is way stronger. Are there redundancies that I can maybe throw in the deck?
Well, it's interesting because that's sort of our first question, right? Is how many games do you play with your deck before you start tweaking it? You know, do you feel like, oh, I've got a good feel and I could make some changes?
I say,
Well, I was going to say mathematically, it's an interesting question because with 99 cards and you're drawing, say, 20 to 30 of them in a game, you're actually
30 would be a lot. I would
30
say.
would be a lot. Yeah, you're basically missing out on a fifth of your or 4/5 of your deck every single time you play it, unless you're able to add in the consistency like with tutoring and stuff. So, for me, you have to be able to at least see every card in the deck and then variations on how those cards work together.
Oh, see, I like game one after game one. I generally feel like, okay, these are the things. And some of that is especially with Meren and the new Commander products, you don't know how those commanders will feel until you really crack it out of the box and see how it plays.
Yeah, because experience counters just never existed before. So.
Right. Like I didn't realize how crucial or how insane it is to make sure that, because the first time I played it, I didn't have all of these like free sack effect creatures that you get value on immediately when playing her, and how much people are going to be like, oh, I need to kill Meren right now, because if I don't, you'll get experience counters and those never go away. And so those are things you kind of have to get the first time you feel it, and then you can kind of build things into it. Often there are things that I just realize that I always, when I first build a deck, forget to add. So artifact hate and enchantment hate.
Yeah, that's so true.
Like, the first time I build a deck, I never put that in there, and then I like play a single game. I'm like, oh right, you need a way to kill artifacts and enchantments.
I have to be able to deal with my opponent's stuff. I totally forgot that part.
Right, and I think the first thing I added was Caustic Caterpillar into the deck after the first time I played it, which is the Magic Oriden's 1/1 for 1 green that has literally is a sacrificable.
Destroy target
Naturalize.
artifact or enchantment, yeah.
And just because you can recur it, he keeps coming back.
That's right, folks. You can play commons in your deck. They're often very good. Before we get too far, let's actually just read what Meren of Clan Nel Toth says. She is 2 black and a green for a 3/4 legendary creature human shaman. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. Like we said before, you can't get rid of these. This is the new ability from Commanders in the Commander 2015 set. And at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it in your hand. So I feel like this is actually different with this deck because you just need to play Meren once and have a couple of experience counters to start understanding your deck a lot more, right?
Well, and this is also so like green-black graveyard shenanigan decks cycle through so many cards and so much more than I think other decks. Because, like, correct, if you're playing like a blue-white or even a red-white or some other deck, you're only going to see 30 cards. In this one, you're dredging 6 cards a turn plus tutoring 3 times a turn plus
Right,
this.
so you're getting a good look.
One game and you can already feel like, oh, I didn't have a tutor target for this situation where I need it, or I didn't have a win condition. You kind of get a feel for what cards you need with this deck. But, I recently built a red-white deck, and that one has taken many playthroughs to figure out, oh, this needs some way to gain card advantage. This needs some way to like get around these situations. Otherwise, it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I think it's totally deck specific. I do generally like to play at least a few times before, and I usually have like a good inkling after one time. These cards are probably bad, or I thought this effect was important and it may not be. But I'll usually play it a couple more times before I actually go through. Just because the process of pulling the deck apart and then rebuilding it is so big that I'd rather have like 3 or 4 pieces of information. You totally could do it after one though and make good changes. I just feel like that's going to mean I'm still going to have to do that again fairly soon.
It's tough too because you're going to have put pet cards in there as well as cute combos or things that you want to pull off but can't in that game, and it's going to be tough because sometimes you do have to get rid of your babies, as they say.
Well, after you've played a couple games is such a great point to do that mentally, right? Because when you're building the deck and you haven't played it yet, you're like, oh, if I get these 3 cards together, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be able to do this cool thing. And then you play a game or two and you get your heart broken because you don't win those games. And then you're like, screw this crazy magical Christmas land thing. Just let me put in a couple cards that like kill all their artifacts.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, inherently, and this is something that you notice a lot in the Master Mod podcast, is I lean way more towards just good cards or good stuff. So like my first inclination when building a deck, because you always get to like, you put 200 cards on a table and you slowly get rid of them. And then I get to 120. I'm like, okay, what can I cut? And my first inclination at that point is just kill every card I love. Because those are the ones that are making, like, Vengevine shouldn't be in an EDH deck. As much as I love that card, in a green-black graveyard strategy, probably doesn't belong.
Right.
Like, when you have Terastodon and the guy who has Undying that kills things, or Persist that destroys permanents, plus you have these 3 other permanent destroying things, you can cut it down to just the one, because eventually you don't need 6 of the same effect, and you kind of just have to kill your babies.
That's really interesting, actually. And the next thing we have written down is what kind of things are you looking for when you play the deck the first few times? So, you know, that's an interesting thing, is, and I mentioned it too, which is how much of any given, you need like to fill certain categories.
Right.
And then that's usually where I find a lot of the changes come, is like, oh, I thought I was really worried that like, oh, this category won't be filled. And so I put a ton in and it's like, I don't need that bad, or I definitely never want to have 3 of that or whatever.
Right.
It's interesting too, especially with the new Mulligan rules. If you're playing by it, this changes a little bit, because I think one of the things you need to look for with the new Mulligan rule is, can this deck function fine with the Vancouver Mulligan?
That's actually that's a super good point. I think it's changed recently.
Yeah,
like how you should build your deck. You really should have more lands than maybe you used to need. You probably should have more ramp than you used to need.
I think people need to cut high drops. I think that specifically the main thing that rule does is, and I've noticed this because we play Highlander Roulette, which is this other 100-card format, and I almost directly ported my Geist deck to that, but my Geist deck has like 15 6-drops, and that is not playable in that format. And it's the same thing now happening here, because before, when I opened a Ham of 7, and I would just throw every 6-drop back.
Yep.
Because I knew like, oh, they're going to go to the side. I'm not going to draw these 6-drops, so I'm going to have a higher chance of getting cards that I can play in the early game, and I'll get those eventually. Now that's not an option. So you really need to cut down on your higher curve pieces, or just play all the ramp and all the lands.
Yeah, this is EDH, man, and people want to play the big stuff. So I think that you got to just make sure your deck allows it in a world where you can't partial Paris, and that means in a world.
Yeah, I think it's just not free anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. It used to be a free roll to play as many Silver and Primordial-esque cards as possible, or all the Primordials, really.
Yeah.
And now it's not as much of a free roll, because you need to be able to cast those things.
Don't play Sylvan Primordial, folks. Don't do it. It's banned. Yeah, it's banned.
So banned.
It is banned. Kessler, no wonder. Yeah, you better kill that baby. Get out of here, Sylvan Primordial.
I killed it. It's gone. Same as Primeval Titan, also not Primeval. Yeah,
Primetime. Primetime's definitely banned. Oh my gosh.
And Emrakul and Grizzlebrand. All these would be in this deck, the green black. So
The
many
recursion deck.
All the
losses.
banned green and black cards
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
in the green and black deck. Yeah,
I
of course.
wonder-
That's
I
why they're
wonder
banned.
Yeah.
Well, how many non-green and black cards have gone banned in the last?
Well,
When was the last? Oh,
Prophet of
it's
Krufix.
no, well, it's green.
It's green.
yeah.
Green's the strongest color in Commander. I'm gonna say it here. Right
Blue
now.
is
You heard it
clearly
here
the strongest
first.
color in Commander. But
I
green
think
might
it
be
goes
second.
actually. I think the real controversial statement is I think green's actually the second best color in Magic. Period.
Ooh.
Blue is the best.
interesting.
I can't argue against that.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think green's the second best. And I think a lot of that has to do with modern Magic and Wizards of the Coast.
Yes, because
Creature inherent.
yes, there's been
Design
a
structure.
concerted effort by Wizards over the last like 7-8 years, because they realized that the part of the game that sort of resonates and is the most fun is the creatures and the creature combat. And so what's the creature color? Green.
Right.
So what are we pushing now as a game?
Yep.
More creatures. So that's just
we've
inherent.
had ramp in standard forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you had like Abrupt Decay and like all
Yeah.
these other weird green things that are just like very, very, very strong. I think honestly that red and green have grown the most over the last 10 years, and black and white have been put in this weird
Well, blue's definitely weakened from what it was.
It definitely is
Yeah.
weakened, but like inherently, blue's things that are best at
Yeah.
are get things that break the game of Magic. And green too, it just we're kind of learning that mana ramp is really good.
Yeah, ramp cheating stuff out and getting stuff out earlier than you're
it's
supposed to.
Really, I mean, it was, and part of that is also artifact. So one of the reasons I think green is the worst color in Battle for Zendikar is because other colors can ramp. And
Right.
in early Magic, artifact ramp was everywhere. So green's one good ability wasn't good. But then
Right.
when you ban every artifact ramp spell in the entire game out of every format, and green's the only color that can do it, you gain a lot of strength for that color.
Fortunately, in EDH, we do have lots of artifact ramp that everyone can use, which is very nice. Now, let's talk more about improving your deck. The third thing we have written down here is how much do you take into account what your opponents are playing? Because I feel like this does make a huge difference when you start playing a deck. Because if you're just playing against decks that will hose yours no matter what, decks with lots of exile your graveyard abilities, someone that's playing Anafenza, it's going to be very hard to get a very good lock on what works and what doesn't in your deck.
True, and sometimes you'll run into commanders, like if Anafest is on the table, I'm just going to not have a good game, and I'm going to be a sad panda.
Yeah, because it's a graveyard hate commander against your
Graveyard
deck.
creature. Yeah, it's not even like I'm a blue-red graveyard-based deck, or I have a black-red artifact-based deck. No, it's creatures in my graveyard are the only thing that this deck can accomplish, and if those aren't there. I actually have a Teza deck that if someone plays a Rest in Peace, it just doesn't win. I had to just insert a ton of enchantment hate that wasn't there originally, just because I knew if Rest in Peace ever got picked, I would just auto lose or played.
Yeah, that card definitely is very powerful. I don't think people give it enough credit.
Yeah, I think it's just something to watch out for is you can have this bad taste in your mouth after a game or two, and you can think you need to change your deck a lot, and then you sort of realize, like, well, it's really just that one deck.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and it's like I don't want to make a ton of changes to my deck based on, like, there's one deck in my play group or one deck that person was playing that one day.
But sometimes you really want to, though. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's
a
very common impulse is like, gosh, that person hurt me so bad. I'm going to put this and this and this into this deck just so I can deal with that.
And then you play another game later, and you're like, none of these cards do anything against these other decks because I don't have to worry about that stuff because somebody's not playing that thing. And I've definitely fallen into that category, and it's just something to watch out for.
Well, and sometimes it's metagame specific. For instance, back in the day, I would only play with Craig and a few of our buddies at All-Star, and there's pretty much only 4 of us. And so, one of our friends, Joel, which I think I mentioned last time I was on here,
yes, Joel.
would only play with land destruction.
Right.
Like Armageddon's everywhere.
Like a
and
smart
so
man.
I would edit my decks to be good against those things.
Right.
But nowadays I play with you guys once in a while. I play with the Riot guys once in a while. I play at Heidi Ho, and that's like a 45-person league. I never play against the same people, and because of that, I'm generally structuring my decks to have as many answers to as many broad things as possible,
Right.
and maybe give them recurability more than I do of specific strategies that I need to be able to stop.
I think that's actually, in general, a good way to start with a deck. And then if you really need it to be meta dependent, that's when you start making those cuts and figuring out, like, I need a Rest in Peace or I need Artifact Hate more than usual.
I mean, you got to build to your meta if you're in a really insular play group like the 4 people. And especially if, like, you'll be in these play groups where everybody has a bunch of decks, but one guy, he only has 2. Mm-hmm. And if one of those decks is really good against your deck, then okay. It just really depends on the exact situation. But I would say, in general, try not to overblow the amount of the amount of weight that you put on any one deck that you're playing against when you're sort of playing one of your new decks early on.
Agreed.
And I think that's something also, the color philosophy really matters here. So like green-black, that's not as much of an issue because green-black are the 2 color pairs that really can answer anything between the 2 of them because green can answer anything but creatures, black kills creatures, and then black and green have the most tutors of any color other than maybe white. But when you go into some of the other colors, knowing like, okay, red and white can't deal with this thing.
Right.
Specifically drawing cards. They can't find the things they need. Or blue and black can't kill anything.
Right. Or black and red can't take care of enchantments.
Right.
Yeah.
So like knowing what your weaknesses are and making sure you're not taking you only have a black-red deck and you're going to a room with only green-white enchantress decks and you're just like, well, I'm never going to do anything.
That's never happened before. Like, just nobody had any follow-up. Okay.
That's what happens when 3 people are at the table sometimes. You just sit there and you're like, well, I said my thing. I thought Josh had something. I looked at you. I'm like, oh, it's a silence.
Wow, that's 96 episodes. It's never happened. Okay, so let's move on and we'll talk. This is a subject we can definitely come back to. I think we just only touched on it here. But let's talk about the deck specifically, about Meren. Because this is a really popular commander. I think it's the most popular right
It's
now.
actually
in
risen in price as well, because I believe the ability here is incredibly strong.
I mean, the fact that you still draw the card if you don't have as many experience counters as the one that you pick. So I don't want to read Meren all the way again, but just to refresh, at your end step, you look at how many experience counters you have, then you choose a creature card in your graveyard. If its CMC is less than or equal to the amount of experience counters you have, you put it directly on the battlefield. If it's more than the amount of experience counters you have, you take it into your hand.
Something key about that, though, is that it can be higher.
True.
You have the choice.
Yeah.
It's not you have to reanimate a thing.
No, you get to choose.
If you want, you can be like, well, I just want to get my flash whatever creature back and just have it. You can.
Right. And I think it's that last part that really pushes Meren into the crazy, because she's still very useful early in the game when you don't have a lot of experience counters. You're still just getting advantage. You're just getting extra cards.
Yeah, and she'll draw you a card no matter what.
As long as you have a card in your graveyard, you get it back.
So let's talk about, well, this is an interesting, like when you started building the deck, you already talked about you had a couple of decks that already had like their toe in the water sort of what you thought Meren wanted to do. Was there anything when you took Meren that you were like, okay, this deck has to do this?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of also the segue, but between the two subject matters.
Jeskai, Narset, what?
Yeah. So generally, something I didn't realize was really important was low drop creatures that have sacrifice abilities on them. So a card that I've always put on my list of cards that I always like put in the pile of black decks and then always take out is Vampire Hexmage. And I didn't put it in the deck originally, and I realized the fact that you can just sack her, even if it's for minimal value, once you play Meren is really good because you get the experience counters from it and rebuy it.
All right, let me read Vampire Hexmage. It's black for a 2/1 Vampire Shaman, has first strike, but the salient detail is sacrifice Vampire Hexmage, remove all counters from target permanent. So there's no cost associated with sacrificing the Vampire Hexmage. A lot of people play that card to just sort of axe out a Planeswalker or something somebody's invested a lot to put a bunch of counters on.
Yeah.
But you're saying the important thing was actually that it can sacrifice itself for free.
Well, two sides. I do think actually the fact that it can be used as a removal spell or just some type of answer
Destroy target Planeswalker spell
is really important. I wouldn't just play a creature that just has the ability to sack it for no effect, or like you gain a life or something, and that card exists, or like do 1 damage to someone. That wouldn't be playable. But the fact that it has these inherent values that are important and can just be used if you need to play on turn 2, and then when you play Meren, sack it so that you have 1 experience, so you can get one of your 1 drops back or one of your 2 drops back if you can pull it off enough.
Not to mention, Vampire Hexmage, I think, is a card that is severely underplayed. People are always playing stuff with counters on it, even if it's a vivid land. I mean, you can really get someone that just doesn't expect, because usually you play something with counters on it, and if it's a Planeswalker, it's like, well, someone has to attack it to get rid of these counters.
I mean, it helps, like, if someone's playing an effect creature, getting the -1 counters off your creature. If someone's, I have Black Sun Zenith in the deck, so if I, like, get Meren down to a 0/1 so I can wipe the board but save her, I can then bring Hexmage back to get her big again. You can use it to kill Planeswalkers. You can use it to kill every Hydra under the sun.
This is one of those cards that you always hear Magic players talk about, cards that don't cost a lot of mana, so you can play them early, but they can have some sort of good effect even if you play them late. Yep. Those are generally very good cards, which is like, well, yeah, it's a 2/1, so early it's fine, it does some stuff, but late it's not just completely worthless. And Vampire Hexmage falls in that category, although I got to say, every time I build a deck, it's in the pile, and then it never quite mates the deck. Because all those situations you talked about, they're still not amazing. Like getting rid of counters on a Vivid land, well, the land still taps for mana. It didn't do a lot. Killing a Planeswalker is great, but there's a lot of cards like Hero's Downfall just kills the Planeswalker. You don't have to cast a creature, then sacrifice it. But in this deck specifically, you found the spot where I think Vampire Hexmage and the like, because Caustic Caterpillar is basically the same card, but it costs a little bit of mana and gets rid of something different.
Right. Well, it like what you're saying, this is a perfect storm. It synergizes with the deck where Hero's Downfall would be actively bad because it's just a one-off spell that I'm never going to see
Meren
again.
Can't do anything with Hero's
Meren
Downfall.
can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't give her experience counter, kill a permanent, end is reanimatable. Reanimatable?
Yeah,
Yeah, there we go.
I wish I could make up a word.
And Caustic Caterpillar is kind of the same deal. It costs a little bit more mana, but it's only one. The fact that it's only a CMC 1 means it can come back the turn that Meren normally can come into play.
Right.
And the fact that artifact enchantments are just everywhere. Like
They are
planeswalkers aren't
everywhere.
nearly as ubiquitous as
Right.
artifacts and
Let me
enchantments.
read the card. Cost of Caterpillar, 1 green for a 1/1 insect. You could pay 1 and a green, sacrifice the cost of Caterpillar, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Yeah, you're right. So you sack this when Meren comes into play if you have the mana. That will put an experience counter on Meren. Now Meren has 1 experience counter. You can choose Cost of Caterpillar from your graveyard. It has 1 CMC, so it comes right back onto the battlefield.
Right.
So that's pretty good synergy. Now, I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier, Kessler. When did you make the realization? Because you said that it took you a playthrough or maybe a game or two?
It took me 1 or 2, I want to say, playthroughs against real people to be like, oh, I need early game sac effects on attached to the creatures, or have a sacrifice thing, but that doesn't have the same engine that you kind of need.
So your brain was like, oh, it's hard to get the ball rolling, kind of.
Right. No, this is very snowbally.
Right.
It's really interesting how it works in that sense, because at first you're only getting these small value creatures, but then by the end of it, you're just like rebuying Terracodon
Right.
and just blowing people's land up all day. And I kind of described it to people as it's kind of having Shieldred on suspend, where Shieldred costs 8 mana. So you're getting it on turn 4, but you're only going to get dirtily things in the beginning or not do anything. But eventually you're going to just be reanimating a thing every single turn. And, because Fleshbag Marauders in it, that also can make everyone sacrifice a creature if you want.
Shieldred is 7 mana, by the way.
Sure.
So powerful.
Get it right.
Get it right, Kessler.
This is 4, which makes it
You
way
just,
better.
Yeah,
Is
you just
Shieldred
saved
in the
us from
deck,
my-
by the way?
No, I cut it because it was in the deck originally, and it was like another large drop that really was just super redundant and almost worse than.
I mean, by the time, I'm assuming, and I might be wrong, but by the time you get to enough experience counters that you're bringing back in a 7, 8, or 9 drop, you probably don't need 3 of them or 5 of them in the deck. You just need any one of those, right?
Right. And I probably, I have the tutor that get the 1 green, the creature, it's a 1/1. I think it's an elf, 2 colors and a green, search for a 6 drop.
Yeah.
I play that in every green deck.
And it also feels like the type of deck where Shieldred doesn't, this is going to sound weird, but she doesn't do anything when she comes into play, right?
Correct.
Whereas Terracodon comes in, has immediate effect. So if you can hear him rifling through cards, he's looking for something. I don't know what.
I'm getting all of the 6 drops because I think, or bigger than 6 drop. And I think there's not that many. I think I'm almost done. But while we're talking about the last 1 drop that's really important to the deck is Spore Frog.
Spore Frog. We've
this
talked
is
about this
such
guy
a good
a
card.
lot.
Yeah, one of my favorite cards. I'll read it. Spore Frog costs 1 green for a 1/1 frog. It says sacrifice Spore Frog. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn.
One of the few cards, by the way, from an old set like Prophecy, whose text is the exact same after being Oracled.
It's so simple and fantastic.
It's
and
Fog Frog.
And cute.
And cute. It rhymes when you need it to. I would say I've tutored in this deck a lot because it's a lot of black tutor cards, and I don't think there's a card I've tutored for more than Spore Frog.
Interesting. The fact that, and again, like, black is known for reanimation, for graveyard recursion, same with green. The fact that you can just guarantee that little Spore Frog's coming back into play, no less, with Meren out in the battlefield every single time is very insane.
And it's better than Vampire Hexmage. We talked about good Vampire Hexmages, and it's just like better in almost every category because it's 1 converted mana cost. It's still free to sack. It's vaguely removal spelly because you can protect yourself from the creatures, kind of removing them, and it can come back forever.
Pretty insane. Spore Frog, and we talk about fog effects a lot in the show as well, but fog effects in general, so powerful. Especially in this case. Now, there is a couple of Moment's Peace, I believe, has buyback on it, or flashback.
Constant Miss.
Has flashback, and people
or
are
buyback, sorry.
Yeah, people are in constant fear of a card that allows you to just fog again and again and again.
Well, they just won't attack you anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as you have that, they'll be like, well, I can attack you, and then I'll just lose all of the value from attacking you. Or I can attack Jimmy, who doesn't have fog on a stick, and the damage is going to matter.
Yep.
Yeah,
so,
it's sort of a truism about games and players of games. When they take action, they want to see some sort of effect from that action. So nobody wants to do something, even though if I attack into your frog, you have to use the frog and something did happen, but it feels like I didn't do anything. And people don't play games to not do stuff. They play games so that they can be like telling a story later and be like, yeah, and then I swung with my dragon and hit him for 12. They don't say so that I could, and then I swung with my dragon and then he Spore Frogged.
Well, and even better than, not better than the buyback spell, but the fact that Spore Frog is on the table and they see it.
Yeah.
They know it's coming.
They're just like, oh, there's no, I have to kill that thing on someone else's turn so I can actually do anything against you.
I mean, that's the same thing with Moment's Peace and Constant Miss, is that you cast it once, you buy it back, or you're able to flash it back, everyone lives in constant fear of it.
Right.
And not even fear. Everyone just knows that they don't want to attack you because they just want, I want my stuff to
They're
do
just
stuff.
hoping you tap out so they can actually do something to you.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
it's even more sort of manipulative in a multiplayer game too, because you don't even think in your mind, well, I eventually have to deal with that thing. You can think, somebody else will deal with that thing.
Yeah. Interesting indeed.
So after counting, there are a total of 7 anything over 5 mana.
Interesting.
Anything over 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
So most of the deck is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 drops, and then there's these 7, 6, 7, 8 drops.
Oh, over 5. So 6 or
Oh,
more.
over 5. Yeah.
Because I'm looking at Sidisi going,
No, there are 5 drops.
Okay,
And there
gotcha.
are quite a few of those.
Now,
But
originally you had more then, so you had Shield Druid and a few more, and that was one of the changes.
yeah. The first thing I did was I realized that Meren relies on a curve, and it's in her card text. She cares about the curve of the cards you have in your graveyard because you'll be able to reanimate quicker, smaller things. And that was the first thing I noticed. It was like, based off of how quick I'm going through my deck, and I'm pretty good at dredging enough and making a deck that's good at putting cards in my graveyard, that you don't need that many 6 drops to start just getting really good value. And if you look at them, half of them are I have Runescar Demon. I have all these cards that when they come in, you're going to either get the card you need or you're going to start winning.
Right, Runescar Demon tutors when it comes in.
Yeah,
basically.
it's demonic tutor on a creature.
Right.
So our next question we have down, we may have partially answered it. Well, I'll ask it. How did the deck play compared to how you envisioned it playing the first time? So, that's something I try to keep in mind is like, when I build the deck, I have a certain idea of how I think it's going to play. Mm-hmm. And then when I play it, if it's not lining up to that, a lot of times I'm like, okay, I did something wrong. But sometimes I'm like, oh, I was just wrong about what I thought the deck should try and do, and actually the deck should try and do this other thing.
Right.
It's interesting. Something that, and this is also just how the metagame has shifted around this mechanic of experience counters. When I first built it, people were so afraid of Meren that like I built the deck being so I need to cast it and then gain value immediately, and that's gone away. People aren't as like, oh man, I need to kill Meren right away. For instance, we played a game last week and I kept Meren. I played it once.
I don't think anybody killed her.
Didn't die the entire game. I eventually died because you suspended 80 cards with Jorah, and that's what happens when you play against Jorah. And if we haven't mentioned, I'm bad at killing people. But it was definitely just people have stopped caring about her being alive. But something that I definitely learned early was you need to be able to use her the turn you play her.
Right.
The other thing I learned is, and this is one of the cards you added, is anything that gives your cards instant speed. So I have Vidalcan already in the deck because she can return creatures to your hand. Being able to then cast those for value during other people's turns is really high.
So Vidalcan Orrery is a 4-drop artifact. You can find it from Conspiracy. I would pick these up now because they're starting to creep back up in price.
The card's great.
Yeah. In fact, this is one of those cards that I just find myself constantly adding to every deck.
It should be in every commander deck.
Yeah, I really
blatantly.
think it's probably there. So Vidalcan Orrery, 4-drop artifact. You may cast non-land cards as though they had flash.
I guess Teferi creature decks don't need it if that's your commander.
Right.
But then who are you and how evil are you?
At this point, any card that can help you get back to doing what Prophet of Krufix helped you do is probably a pretty good
It's
card,
true. It's
right?
half of Prophet of Krufix.
Right.
But better, as in it's not even just creatures, it's not land cards.
And, it can be better in the sense that it doesn't have to be in a specifically green-blue deck.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
Well, I'm just saying that's how good Prophet of Krufix was.
Yeah.
Because this card is basically half of Prophet of Krufix, and it's still a must-include in every commander deck.
And isn't Prophet Krufix the only banned gold card, or is there another one?
No, there's Coalition Victory.
Right.
There's
Isn't
there's a
that-
couple.
Okay, cool. All right. Never mind. Ignore
Coalition
me.
Victory. What a card.
But Vidalcan Orrery, take a look at it. If it's not in your deck, you should have a very good reason why it's not. That could be price. But
Card is ridiculous.
There's another thing. This deck generally leads you down a certain path, and I have avoided it. Meren is really good at the I'm forgetting what they're called, Grave Pack cards, where if I sacrifice a creature,
Dictate
everyone
Erebos
else,
and Grave
yeah,
Pack,
Dictate
Right.
Erebos. And I have a Teza deck, and it's very much on that game plan, and that's all about killing people with Pain Blood Artist and the new Blood Artist that just came out, and
Cutthroat.
sacrificing all my permanents, and I never attack anyone in that deck. And eventually just kills them through sacrifice effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I avoided it because I don't want the exact same deck times 2. I don't need 2 of the exact commander deck.
Right.
But this deck, and something I'm not doing but other people should do, is play that strategy.
Fleshbag Marauder
it's
every turn is
good.
very, very good.
Right.
Very
And
good, yeah.
not to mention just like Evolutionary Leap is overpowered in this deck. And Evolutionary Leap with Meren, with Grave Pact is just an insane board state that most people can't just beat.
Right.
Evolutionary Leap is one of the cards that a lot of people put on their list
For pet cards,
For
yeah.
pet cards, I noticed.
Thank you, by the way, everyone that submitted your pet cards. I had a blast reading through all of them.
I wrote a lot down. So the next time we do another like underrated cards or hidden gems or pet cards episode, I have a bag full of them. It's going to be awesome.
I
Jimmy,
think
don't
my
steal
favorite
them.
pet card, by the way, was someone said Jace the Mind Sculptor.
It's not that great in Commander. It draws a target on your face and it bounces a creature.
It's pretty
Still
good.
pretty good.
It's pretty awesome. Brainstorm every turn is good.
Yes, I agree with that.
Evolutionary Leap is 1 and a green for an enchantment. It says pay a green and sacrifice a creature. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it just draws you a creature card whenever you sack a creature, which you want to do with Meren anyway, and also just add value when stuff dies is good anyway.
Yeah, you get a sacrifice trigger on a stick, so you get to really start firing off her experience counter count. And on top of that, you put those creatures into your graveyard that you will then get back. So you're really not sacrificing a creature. You're just getting a sacrifice trigger because Meren does what she does. And you're drawing creature cards to then also use with Meren because they're probably good with her. And it's a chain that eventually makes you very happy. The most favorite thing I've done with it is Golgari Thug is one of the dredgers in the deck. And dredgers are important because you need to fill your card out with graveyard.
Right.
But Evolutionary Leap and Golgari Thug, the way the triggers work together, because Golgari Thug, when it dies, lets you put a creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, lets you literally return any card from your graveyard to your hand whenever you need it.
Right, because that draw, yeah. So the Evolutionary Leap trigger.
So Evolutionary Leap, you sack a creature to draw. Then the trigger of Golgari Thug dying lets you put a creature card on top of your library, which then Evolutionary Leap lets you draw.
That's a very good combination. Golgari Thug, 1 in the black for a 1/1 human warrior. When Golgari Thug dies, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library and dredge 4. If you would draw a card, you can instead put exactly 4 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. If you do return this card from your graveyard to your hand. So it
lets you loop the dredges. Like, it lets you get that
exactly.
dredge trigger every turn.
So Golgari Thug with Evolutionary Leap means you get to regrow whatever card you want to when the Thug dies.
Right, and you're fueling your dredge engine because during your draw step, you'll dredge Golgari Thug to continue the chain and put 4 more cards in your graveyard. And that's like drawing 4 cards a turn instead of 1. Plus,
Right.
It's kind of like brainstorming every turn.
Yeah.
Because actually better because you're looking at 4 more cards every turn, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about dredge for just a hot second here. It's a mechanic that we very rarely talk about on the show, but it is one that is pretty high in the storm scale, correct?
No, it'll never. It's like Storm. Banding is higher than Storm. Dredges are right below Storm.
That's
Right.
only because banding is confusing.
Right. Yeah. Well, no one knows how that mechanic works.
The storm scale, by the way, is Mark Rosewater's scale that essentially says these are the mechanics that very, very likely will not see reprint the closer it is to storm.
Right.
Basically like them saying
Standard
these are the
reprint.
Right.
Yeah,
Standard.
these are like the ones where they said these were kind of mistakes.
Yeah. No. They're overpowered or too powerful in what they do. Because Dredge, as we just said, if you build your deck around graveyard shenanigans, reads you draw 4 cards instead of drawing a card.
Right.
So dredge is just the mechanic where instead of drawing a card, you basically mill yourself for a certain
For whatever
amount.
the number is. Yeah.
And a lot of times in dredge decks, and maybe you do this in this deck, on your very first turn, you'll just purposely not play a land so you can discard a dredge card and just start that.
Right. And there are
turn 1.
There are
Yeah.
blatant, very powerful legacy and vintage decks.
Yeah.
That's literally the game plan.
Yep.
It's the only deck in Magic that will draw first every single time if it can.
Yeah.
Probably the most famous dredge card, especially for Commander players, is Life from the Loam.
Yep.
Which is another one of my pet cards, I would say, and is maybe the second most tutored card in the deck. I think I've entombed for Life from the Loam more than any card I've ever entombed for.
Life from the Loam, 1 in the green.
Entomb, so good, by the
For
way.
a sorcery, return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand, and you can dredge 3. So you essentially can just draw plenty of lands with Life from the Loam.
A lot of green-black decks have a problem of if they get choked up on lands, that's an issue. And this lets you get the lands you need, lets you dredge. And that's the problem with dredging, is you never draw cards. And when you're not drawing cards, you're not drawing lands, so that means your mana base isn't growing. But what Life from the Loam lets you do is make sure you get those mana bases and getting you the dredge. So it does everything you kind of want to do in one nice little cute package. Plus you can strip mine, which is really mean.
Life from the Loam is just very, very good.
Yeah, very good indeed. Especially when you're just popping up strip mines left and right there. Oof.
Oh,
Rough.
man, I loved it didn't come together, but in the very first Masters of Modern that there was like, what is it, Worm Harvest, and Life from the Loam. There was that deck. There was a black-green deck.
Modern Masters.
Yeah,
Modern
the
Masters
very
one,
first.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
not your podcast.
The very,
The
first episode, we brewed a land destruction deck because that's
Yeah,
how we figured we were
sorry.
going to get followers.
In Modern Masters 1, that was
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
draft archetypes. It didn't always come together, but when it did, you just stream rolled everybody.
Oh no, my GP Vegas, the first one, my deck was the coolest thing on the planet. I had Life from the Loam. I had all the dredge pieces, but I had Academy Ruins. I had all the mana that do 5 colors. I had Knight of the Reliquary.
Oh,
So
Jeez.
I would dredge into a 2020 Knight of the Reliquary.
That's awesome.
And then get the lands back when I needed them. I had the most fun I've ever had. I cycled the Etched Champion
Yep.
with Academy Ruins 30 times one game. I just literally drew through my whole deck, and I had started playing with sideboarded games of 10 extra cards because I would deck myself before killing my opponent.
Jeez, that is intense. So now that we've talked about sort of how you've envisioned the deck, how you wanted to see it play, and some of the things you've already done, like we've notably said, you've taken out cards that are higher than 6 drops, because just both with the Vancouver Mulligan and also just the deck doesn't necessarily want it. Also,
Right.
how often are you going to get Meren up to 7, 8, 9?
It
experience
happens.
counters?
That's something that's really interesting. That's what's weird about experience counters. It's going to happen no matter what.
Right.
Eventually, I'm going to get the counters I need because at worst case scenario, I play her when I have a bunch of creatures and play late game, and it just will happen.
or somebody can just Supreme Verdict, and then it'll happen.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one of the insane things, and I'm not even sure I like it about experience counters. It's maybe a complaint I have is that they're just so inevitable, and with some of them, it's in a Nivix decks, Mizzix decks. It feels so inevitable that eventually they're just gonna have infinite mana for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, I think Mizzix is actually harder to get experience counters on, depending. I think a deck like this or the one that gets it for just creatures coming into the battlefield with power 2 or less can be way easier because you can get them a lot at one time.
Yeah. No. I think Meren is the easiest. I think Mizzix has the most explosive use of them because eventually,
Yes,
Absolutely.
Meren, if you get to 10 experience counters, it doesn't
it
matter
stops
past
mattering.
that.
I literally I'm planning on trying to get as many of the experience tokens they give you to make one of those Abacus 3D experience counters for this deck, and I'm not going to put more than 10 because there's no creature in my deck more than 10 experience.
Right.
If that happens,
Yeah.
I'm just I would.
Then you're just
Infinite.
anything I want, I get out. Yeah.
Pretty much anything you want. Except
mean,
for he got his
except for-
sneezes out too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for
Bless you. Kessler.
Ulamog or something like that.
But they shuffle back. You can't even play them.
Oh, that's a
New
really good
Lamog you
point.
can do, I guess.
Ulamog,
Ulamog you
yeah,
could,
Ulamog.
yeah.
So that's the largest thing I could be really trying to pull off. But then you don't get the cast trigger either, so it's just you're getting a 10/10 indestructible.
That
Give me
Mills.
Terracodon
yeah, it's true.
all the
Yeah,
time.
give
What
me
about
Terracodon.
what's the Void Winnower or something? That's just gonna make people mad.
Well, I mean, he can't even.
He doesn't do anything when it comes to anything.
That joke's never.
All right. So speaking of adding and subtracting cards, are there any cards right now that are on the chopping block, and why? And what are you looking to put in there?
Yes. So I would say I have 5 cards I'm currently considering chopping.
One of my favorite cards is
know.
at the top.
Brutalizer Exarch, which I literally just added when I searched for 6 or more drops while going through it. I don't think he does enough.
The card is very good, however. It's 5 and a green for a creature cleric 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you can either search your library for a creature card, reveal it, and then put that card on top of your library after you shuffle your library, or you can put target non-creature permanent on the bottom of its owner's library. So it can tuck a non-creature permanent essentially on the bottom.
And I think he's really good. I think he's worse in this deck now because of what we talked about. I put a lot of work in getting a lot of artifact hate in there and a lot of tutor cards in the early drop slots. So now that exists, there are better large drops that I am playing that can kill permanents, and the tutor effect isn't nearly as important because by the time I get the 6 mana, I should have dredged 30 cards and tutor for the exact
You'll
things I
have
need.
found the
and
card
I
you
don't
need,
need
yeah.
it
Right.
anymore. So that's number 1. Number 2, Nim's Death Mantle.
Nim
Another
Death
good
Mantle.
card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
also another pet card that I saw a couple times.
I think this is way better in white decks, or actually more specifically blue decks, because of the fact that you keep mana open.
Right. So Nim Death Mantle says it's a 2-drop equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. So creatures with Intimidate can't be blocked except for artifact creatures and or creatures that share a color with it. And whenever a non-token creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, something that Meren does, you may pay 4 colorless mana, or 4 generic mana, sorry. If you do, return that card to the battlefield and attach Nim Death Mantle to it.
So my issue with this is purely the fact that green-black doesn't like keeping its mana open. You're tapping out whenever you can, and keeping 4 mana up is really costly. And you have to kill something. I mean, yes, there are going to be times where you can do that yourself, but because of what Meren does, Meren almost does that better for you. And so it's a little redundant, and you don't have the mana to keep open for it.
That's a great point because that is something I don't think comes through my head very often when thinking about adds and cuts. Like a card like Nim Deathmantle, you read it and it says, oh, this is perfect for Meren. We're already recurring stuff. This is redundancy. We talked about this. This is, re-triggering enter the battlefield triggers. This seems like what you want to do, but the fact that you're not holding up mana and the fact that you're also just going to be dredging and doing stuff already where you're getting cards in your graveyard and you don't really care if they're already there.
Right, and the deck has a lot of death triggers versus ETB triggers, so you don't get as many accidental someone killing your creature and you getting it back. It's more like you're doing it yourself, and so there are definitely mana concerns, and that's my biggest problem with it. And I wouldn't have learned with it without having played with it 5x times and being like, oh, I wish this was just a creature that did something.
Yeah, that's something I find when I'm going through and evaluating the deck as I'm playing it, is just like, how does each card feel? Right. So then when I go later, what I do is I'll just sort of look at each card and be like, how did this feel when I had it? And a lot of cards, they just feel like, I felt like I couldn't find a spot to play this card.
Yeah.
And that's very common, and it's very common on cards like Nim Deathmantle, where you sort of have to delve into why. And what you found out was, oh, I couldn't find a spot to play it because I couldn't find a spot where I wanted to have 4 mana open.
Right.
It's not anything about the card exactly. It's actually the way that the card forces you to function. And that's something to really pay attention to. That was something like in Mizzix where I kept talking about, like, every time I played it, and when I started tweaking it the next time, I would just pull out anything that wasn't an instant or sorcery, because every time I held a card in my hand that wasn't an instant or sorcery, even Soul Ring, I kept thinking, I don't have a spot to play this because I want to hold my mana open. Nim Deathmantle, exact opposite. I don't have a spot to play this because I don't want to hold my mana open.
Right.
But it's just feel, really.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, there's 2 phases for me, and this is back to the subject of the podcast. There's when you first build it, there's just like the grandiose, obvious things you did wrong. And that's where I start making changes immediately, quickly, just to get through as many different ways of playing to see what works best. And then there's I've now played 100 games with this deck, and I've noticed that, on game 98 through 99, I kept drawing Nim's Deathmantle and being like, oh, this does nothing. I need a better card for this. Or this card is clunky for whatever reasons it's clunky, and then you change it one by one.
Let me ask you guys something. Have you ever taken a card out of your deck and then at some point later been like, no, actually, I should have that card in the deck?
Mm-hmm.
All the time.
All the time.
I can't expressly tell you one right now, though. Not Commander related. Oh, Jimmy, you do yours.
Grave Titan. The card is amazing.
It's bonkers.
It's bonkers. And then I took it out of Marchesa because I was like, I don't need this big creature. It just makes 2/2s and whatever. And then I realized, no, this makes a lot.
No, it's a win condition.
It's a win condition.
It's a win condition a lot of times in colors that don't always have them.
Yeah. The card gets out of control extremely quickly, and the fact that you can recur it with Marchesa once it gets some counters on it is also very, very,
right.
very
I put it in Teza just because of the tokens, because it's a black token maker, and you play in Teza every black token maker you can find that has good value, and it's like, you forget just, when I cast this, I'm probably winning because I have 10 power in the field that's just going to grow and grow, and they can't do anything about it.
Demands removal.
Next card on the list. And
well, Josh, do you have any cards that you've done?
Vidalcan Orrery is probably the one that I've done that with the most, because it feels like, I'm fine, I don't need to cast it. But when you have Vidalcan Orrery on the table, you feel like that's the best that you can feel in Magic, which is like, I can do my stuff whenever I feel like it. And in multiplayer, it's so much more important because there's 3 other players or 4 other players, and I need to be able to respond. It gives virtual haste to my creatures. It's so good, but it always feels it's hard. Those are the type of cards that are really hard to evaluate when you're not playing.
Right.
So when you're just looking at a bunch of cards, Vidalcan Orrery looks expendable, but when you're playing, you realize, man, every time I have that, I feel so good. Like my deck just feels like it's really, really I don't know.
It's just ready to respond in the best way.
Yeah, you feel safe.
Creatures with enter the battlefield abilities become instants, you know? And when you can make every card in your deck essentially adding new keywords to it, it's very powerful.
Having the ability to respond to what your opponents are doing. Just that. Being able to be like, oh, you did that thing. Now I know the exact correct decision that I should have made on my turn.
Right.
Because it's basically you're getting to see the future.
Hindsight is 2020.
You're getting to move your seat too, which I think is so important in Commander, because if Alex is playing the counterspell deck, well, sitting directly to the left of him is the worst place I can be, because that's the point where he's going to have the most mana open and the most counterspells in his hand. Whereas if I'm sitting directly to his right, now he has to get through everything Jimmy casts, everything Craig casts, and he might counterspell some of their stuff, and then it's my turn, and he might not have a counterspell anymore or mana open. And so being able to move your seat virtually is just so powerful. So yeah, I've talked enough about. I should have put that on my pet cards, although everybody plays it. So
I guess before I move on to a next card I want to cut, I do want to mention with redundancy, because it's going to come up, I think, immediately anyways. There are redundancy effects that are good and bad. So Liliana Heretic Sealer, which is the creature one, is the type of redundancy in this deck that I think it wants. Because eventually you get to the point where you have enough mana or you have enough time to start bringing back multiple things. And so anything that lets you do that on your turn for free is very strong. And she has, her trigger is very online with what you're doing already, which is sacrificing a creature.
Right. That's Liliana Heretical Healer from Origins.
Right.
Yeah, if you recall, she flips over on our Planeswalker side if a creature you control died this turn.
Non-token. Yeah.
And you get a token, and then she can reanimate spells, basically, or creatures.
Pretty powerful. I like that card quite a bit.
So next on the cut list, and this is going to be a little bit sinful for people because people expect this to be in all green black decks, is Gerard Golgari Lichlord. This has a really similar problem to Niv Deathmantle. Also, I don't like killing people. I think that might be an issue because it's like definitely a win condition.
This is certainly a win condition. And this is a deck that a lot of people, this is, by the way, in the Meren deck.
Yeah, it comes with, yeah.
So it's black, green for a 2/2 zombie elf legendary. Of course, Gerard Golgari Lichlord gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Already sounding pretty gravy. 1 a black and a green. Sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses a life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. That's a win condition. And finally, sacrifice a swamp and a forest, and you can return Gerard from your graveyard to your hand. Why are you cutting this, Alex?
It's like on the bottom of the cut list. Like I definitely see it sticking around longer, but it's so mana hungry, and
right.
and like the fact that he's big never matters. You're not attacking anyone with him because it's commander, and attacking with a single creature that doesn't have evasion doesn't really get in,
or that isn't your commander.
Yeah. And it's also if that's happening and you're getting in, you're picking on the one guy that you don't want to be attacking because they have nothing, and that might be me being nice.
Well, it also leaves you open.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are problematic with it. It's definitely on the lower end because it is a win condition that late game can help you kill stuff, but it is super mana hungry. Mm-hmm. And to be totally honest, he's probably the biggest creature. This deck isn't running, because of the curve problem, isn't running a lot of big things to throw at people. It's not like other Reanimator decks where you're trying to get big. If I was playing with him, I'd have a bunch of 7 drops. But because I am playing with Meren and I have a bunch of 1 and 2 drops, throwing a Spore Frog at someone isn't exactly super exciting.
Yeah,
Not to mention, you don't want to sack that Spore Frog anyway.
Yeah, that's what I think makes the most sense, is if you're going to make the decision to take out the larger drops for a variety of reasons we already discussed, then Gerard just gets a lot worse.
Right, and it's power. If it was converted mana cost, I'd almost be more interested.
Right.
But like most of the big creatures I'm keeping, other than maybe Terrastodon, are like really 3/3s. Like even Brutalizer Exarch is a 3/3.
Right, and it's very hard for you to change Gerard in the way that really makes him broken, where you're getting the creatures back. You just get 1 a turn.
Right, and
on your turn.
If you look at the Avenger of Zendikar, like that's a slightly bigger creature. That's one of the higher drops, but even that one, I'm winning in anyways.
You
I
don't
need
actually want
to sacrifice it.
That's the win condition.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
So like it ends up being like I'm either using big mana to play this creature, or he's not doing enough. Next is Corpse Augur. This is another redundancy one for those who don't know. Corpse Augur is 3 and a black. He is a creature zombie wizard. When Corpse Augur dies, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard, and he is a 4/2.
So card draw.
Really good.
Very powerful. Yeah, especially because you're usually targeting yourself, I'm guessing.
True.
Because you've dredged like 20 creatures into there.
Well, then you lose 20 life.
True. But you draw 20 cards.
My issue with it is redundancy.
Uh-huh.
There is an issue of life loss. Like eventually you don't want to target yourself because you're going to be killing yourself possibly. Right. But more in reality, this deck doesn't need card advantage as much as other decks because it inherently is a card advantage engine. The whole deck does that.
Right.
Versus other black decks that I can imagine wanting this, where you want to be drawing a lot of cards. Like if I was doing a black-red deck or a black-white deck, having a card draw engine like this would be super powerful. But in this deck specifically, I'm dredging 4 cards a turn, which is I'm literally brainstorming 4 cards a turn. Every time I mill my deck that's drawing those cards, lets me draw cards. I'm rebuying creatures. That amount of card advantage is decent. But by the time it's good, you have cards already, and it takes a while to get there already.
Yeah, there's a point at which card draw is actually not helping you anymore. You know, if you draw one more card than everybody else, that's helping you a lot because you're doubling the amount of cards your opponents are having. If you're drawing 7 more cards than everybody else, that's helping you a lot. But the 8th card doesn't help you as much.
Right.
Because that's just percentage-wise, like, oh, I got another, 9% advantage now. And then the next card is even less. Yeah, so I can see, and we always advocate a lot of card draw and mana rent because those things smooth out your deck, but there is definitely diminishing returns on that stuff.
Well, and early game card draw is really good in this deck even, but
Right.
this isn't an early game card draw because someone has to have creatures in their graveyard.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You can't really just do it on turn 5 because you might only have 2 creatures in there, and that's
At
like,
best,
it's okay.
you have one, and it's okay, and then you put all the effort of making that happen. The other thing with it is this, and I mentioned it before, this is a tap out deck. I don't hold mana open. So drawing a bunch of cards doesn't do that much for me because options don't matter as much because I'm the active player. I'm not waiting to see what you do and seeing, which one of my 12 answers in my hand do I have to stop you? I'm putting things in play and hoping that I can either overthink what you're going to do or just do my own thing and hope you don't stop me.
Right. Not to mention, Corpse Augur is in this weird spot with this deck in particular where he's at his best when you're drawing like 5 to 10 cards, and he quickly actually becomes worse because you start losing a lot of life. Being forced to target someone else's graveyard is never ideal because you can't really control what's going on there. So it is an interesting cut. I think I agree here. You've got so many other things going on where you're getting things to your hand, you're returning them to the battlefield, that just straight card draw isn't necessarily what you want to do unless you're trying to draw so much that you're forced to discard.
Right. And last but not least, in Tumor Exarch, he is one of the Exarchs, so he has 2 abilities you get to choose. One is return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. The other one is target opponent reveals his or her hand, and you choose a non-creature card from it, and then that player discards that card. He is a cleric, he is a 2/2, and he costs 2 and 2 black. To be totally honest, it's just not a good commander card. He's very good and constructed with Birthing Pod-like decks. This deck is a Birthing Pod-like deck. It's playing Birthing Pod. And this guy, because it only affects one player, isn't that great. And when the Gravedigger effect is better on like 3 other cards in the deck, including and especially Meren.
Yeah, it feels like a tool that you don't actually need.
Right.
Yeah.
And like,
because
just
one
targeted
card,
discard doesn't do anything to anyone.
Yeah, it's just too hard for it to basically whiff. I mean, you'll get something, but it's so hard to know like which player should I point it at, and then
It could just not matter. If I target you, Jimmy could be the one with the counterspell.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
if I target Jimmy, you're the one that has a Genesis wave and just win the next turn. I'm like, oh, well, that was a waste of everything.
yeah, it's just too hard to aim it correctly. It's too hard to hit the bullseye with that card.
It's the same reason burn is bad in Commander.
Yeah.
Because pointing beyond life totals, but like any targeted thing is bad against one player.
Yeah,
If I'm like
it's just
3
card
damage to
disadvantage.
damage is just, that's definitively like discarding 3 cards at that point.
Definitely. Very interesting. Well, I loved seeing those, especially because none of those cards were inherently bad just by looking at it, right? Each of those needed a
Right.
justification. Each of those could easily have made the cut in the deck, but I love the reasoning behind it. I think it's a really important lesson to learn that sometimes you do have to get rid of the cards that you think are doing what you want the deck to do, and it follows sort of the quote-unquote guidelines that we've set forth on the show of redundancy and make sure your deck can function without your commander. But you also have to consider what the card is doing sort of in the overall span of the game. And that's something you actually brought up that we could talk about a lot more in the future is what is your role in the commander game at the table? Are you control? Are you beat down? Are you the aggressor?
Right.
Are you sitting back? Are you holding mana open? And that actually helped answer a lot of questions about which cards were going to stay and which ones are going to go.
And what the role of the deck is. I would also say, something to always consider with the deck is there's a real cost in Commander of including and all constructed Magic, but because Commander is no matter what 99 cards to a certain extent, even though all their formats are pretty much that anyways, but this is costing another card. This Corpse Augur could be a answer to I don't have a good graveyard hate effect maybe in here, and then I'm just going to get steamrolled by graveyard hate Dose, the other guy at the table who's maybe more efficient than me or is doing one of the more hyper-aggressive graveyard
just
strategies.
got off to a better start.
And because I'm playing some weird, dirtily, I draw a bunch of cards that I don't need, I don't get to have that answer I need to that, or I don't have X, Y, Z that I need to do my plan.
Right.
One of the really interesting things that you said about Corpse Augur, which is the card draw that I really like, is just thinking of how your deck plays and therefore how that card plays. So what you said about how, card advantage doesn't matter as much because my deck already has it in another way, but also just the way that I'm playing my deck. So this deck's going to tap out and play all its stuff.
Right.
And so it's not playing because a lot of people will see that deck with Consecrated Sphinx and they draw 40 cards and they just stay draw go and just sit there and answer everything that happens, and they'll be like, I want to play my deck like that. But you can't play you couldn't play the Meren deck that way because that's not the way that the deck can work, right? You have to play your creatures out, and then they have to hit the table and do stuff, right?
Well, and I do think Meren, you can build a deck that way with Meren, even with Meren, because I do think there are cool ways to take a commander in ways people don't think about.
Right,
and with
right,
Meren, if you just play only the black and green cards that have flash or are instant speed effects, or you give them instant speed somehow, or you're only playing with spells and creatures that kind of do that, then you can build your deck to be, I have my mana open all the time.
Right.
Because her other ability is you don't have to put it into play, or you do if it's below the
draw it.
mana cost. You can just always draw it, and at that point, you can play that Drago style commander play with her. I'd love to see a deck like that. I personally didn't build it.
It would be, I mean, it would be difficult. I agree you can. I guess what I'm saying is just realizing like, oh, that's good for that deck for these reasons. That doesn't mean it's good for my deck for the same reasons.
And that's, I guess, more to the point, and this is the point you're making, is look at what your deck's trying to do. Not what could it do, but what are you trying to do with your deck, and then make sure your deck is following suit with that. Consecrated Sphinx is great when you are countering everything, because your opponents are now afraid, because you literally have every card
Right.
that you could ever want.
Ever.
That's not as good when you're tapped out. It
Right.
just isn't, because people don't, like, I can have all the cards in the world, but if I don't have any mana, I'm not doing anything with them unless they're all Force of Will, and
Then you're
cheating, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, did you see the it's a story, but basically they created a format where there was no ban list. No card in Magic is banned, and they all have to create a deck, and they all show up to the table, and people are playing Moxes and Black Lotuses and blah 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 blah. And one guy's just sitting there, and they're like, okay, it's your turn. He's not doing anything. He's just putting lands and creatures in the play, but not really anything. And they're like, okay, we don't get it. And they're all like bad early cards. And then they all like turn away for a second, and he takes the proxies out of every deck, and they're all cheaty face.
My favorite card. Oh my goodness. I should put that under my pet cards. That is fantastic. Well, that's one way to do it.
Cheaty face.
So build your deck right, guys.
That's
Just
right.
proxies and cheaty face.
All right, let's move on to the listeners. So Kessler has a very special question for you guys that actually you get asked all the time, correct?
Me? Yeah. And we ask our listeners. So the question is, which commander card that isn't legal in Modern would you like to see be played in Modern?
Meren,
or legal
the
to
clan
be
Nel
Meren?
Toth. Can I say Meren?
Yeah, you can say Meren. I would love the red Planeswalker commander.
Oh, Duretti.
Duretti would
oh
be
my
my favorite.
Goodness.
That'd be so sick.
That would be unbelievable.
I don't think it should be, maybe,
Yeah.
but like it's super sick. Oh, well, it's a 4-drop. I guess 4. Yeah, Infect would kill that person pretty quick. He's sweet. I love that guy.
Yeah, Duretti's very powerful.
Maybe one day next time, or one of the times I'll be on, we can talk about my Malfagor deck that it's all artifact themed, and it's like a black-red Duretti deck basically. But because Malfagor lets you discard your hand, it's just a discard outlet. /board
I played
wipe
against
/
that deck. You don't. Yeah.
I don't kill people very quickly.
Yeah, good
but
old-
I've actually, my win percentage with the deck is crazy
deck's
high.
very good.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, Sour of Insanity status.
Most people end up not having any cards in their hands either. I've noticed. And
It doesn't. Oh, because Sour of Insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that card's really good. That's the problem. Sometimes colors just have a specific.
Yeah,
like you
there's a
have to
thing they
play.
do.
If you're black-red, why aren't you playing Sour of Insanity? Because you're a nice person, I guess. But like from a power level perspective, you're not playing correctly.
Indeed.
All right, time for the end step where we talk about something cool outside the world of Magic. Kessler, you told us you had something cool.
So I started, and it's a long path, but it's listening to the book, The Words of the Winds, or The Name of the Wind.
In the Name of the Wind.
In the Name of the Wind, which is a King Killer Chronicles book, one of the first
King
two
Filler.
of many.
I believe you.
So the path to reading this book, I actually have owned it in every version. I own a hard copy, I own a Kindle version, and then I bought the audiobook version with my Audible account because I have a friend who literally said he moved to Prague, and he said, I am not going to talk to you on Facebook until you finish this book.
Oh, Sam.
6
Oh,
months ago.
Sam.
And I'm just like, I can't, whatever reason, that first chapter, I kept rereading it. I've heard the thing where one character gets robbed like 50 times in the first chapter, and like finally book on tape, got on an airplane to Hong Kong, and I was like, I'm getting through this. And so I'm
Nice.
now into it. And
It is King Killer. I said King Filler for some reason.
Oh, because
Yeah.
I made that joke earlier.
King Filler makes no sense. King Killer, a lot more sense.
Yeah, there's two, actually. I've read them both. The second one's like the the slow regard of silent things, the silent regard of slow things, the something regard of something things.
What's interesting about it?
The Wise Man's Fear, right?
Letting all my
Oh
nerd
crap!
flag flies.
There's a third one, but it's like it's a novella, I think, is what it is, and that's
Novella.
the regard of things. Yeah, you're right. It's okay, fine. I got the names wrong. Anyway,
So
Patrick
Rothfuss.
Rothfuss.
I'm gonna
It is
let
a good book.
I'm gonna
He's
let
got
my
the best beard
nerd
ever.
flag fly a little bit, or show a little bit. But I've
We have
watched
magic
an anime
podcasts.
before in my life, and one of them I watched recently because Netflix did their own exclusive was the 7 Deadly Sins one, which was decent. It was pseudo cheesy, but whatever. I was bored one night and finished all 12 episodes or whatever it was. But they're like identical, except one's a cheesy anime with anime tropes. But like it starts with
really?
weird barkeep that's like has a mysterious past where he's actually like a crazy badass that everyone's afraid of, and he's like wanted by the government, but no one knows who he is. And then someone shows up and like tells everyone what's going on. And then he used to hang out with a team of people that and then there's these guys, and I'm only at the part where the bad guys show up, I guess, but they're also very similar.
But that's just, that's
Fantasy trope 101.
I mean, that's just like old samurai or Western too. Like,
True.
yeah, it's just sort of.
It's kind of like what that Star Wars movie did with that Star Wars movie.
The hero's tale. Well, except this is a slightly different trope where that's like farm boy that's becoming a hero, and those are bartender that was a hero and telling you his tale.
Well, it's just
one he was a farm boy.
I was talking Force Awakens versus Episode 4 in terms of similar stories, but we don't need to get into that. Not now. The name
I'll defend it for days.
I know you will. And the name of the book is In the Name of the Wind. Patrick Rothfuss. By the way, look at the picture of this guy. His beard is epic. Holy
You know, you would never be allowed
moly.
on a magic card because they don't like wizards with pointy hats and big beards.
Really?
Yeah, that's
because
their
they
thing.
don't want it to be cliche.
Yeah, they're against the cliches.
I want people to look at Patrick Rothfuss, Robert Jordan, the late great, and George R.R. Martin, and there's just evidently like a certain kind of look that a fantasy writer has to have.
What book series did Robert Jordan
Wheel
read?
of Time.
Oh. I
Don't
listened to another
do
podcast.
Do not start that series because it is like 50,000 pages of. It's so long.
Oh,
Holy moly.
Getting into things. So I went to a Cracked podcast screening, the Cracked podcast, for my birthday, which was yesterday. My girlfriend bought me tickets and brought. It was okay, but one of the guys, when they opened up the question, came up and was like, just started going for like 10 minutes on a rant about Wheel of Time. And I was like, oh no, kid, please stop. This is going to be on the internet.
Don't do it, kid.
Don't do it.
It was about Oscars and racism, and he went about the
geez.
Wheel of Time for 30 minutes. I was like,
Oh,
this
man.
is rough.
That is intense.
Well, on that note,
Never bring up Wheel of Time on a podcast.
No.
yeah,
We're breaking the rule to teach the rule. This is
man,
the one
they got their
exception.
money's worth out of the end step this time. I guess there's like 5 things that we talked about.
I consume a lot of content. It was my birthday. Did I tell you it was my birthday?
Oh yeah, end step. Alex Kessler's birthday.
If you guys are in LA and want to go to Dave & Buster's this Saturday before this podcast was released,
If you have a time machine,
Yeah,
you should
make
be
it back
watching
in
the
time.
Pro Tour. Can you tell us? Just tweet at me who won and how right or wrong I was
Absolutely.
about what.
Considering it ends on Sunday.
I'm gonna say
Saturday.
Swedish Kibler won.
Swedish Kibler?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yol, your buddy Yol.
I
Yeah.
love Yol, man. Team Eureka, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a great run at the last GP they all played at. So I'm a big fan of
he's
Yol.
pretty
obviously.
good at Magic.
pretty good.
I've heard tale.
And he took a mono red deck all the way home, and he also played an EDH game and won it on stream. I mean, the guy he's lights out my hero right now. You know what I mean?
Jimmy has like stars in his eyes right now. Yeah. Well,
I'm
he's
just
pretty
thinking
dreamy.
about- He's very dreamy.
Oh, also tweet at whoever won if it wasn't Yul Larson or if it was Yul Larson, and tell them to be on the Masters of Modern podcast so I can get them on there. And
You
ask
realize
them about
this is
stuff.
going to come out after the Modern Pro Tour's already happened.
Yeah,
and
but
after
we're just gonna keep. I wanted the whole top 8. We're gonna do a run. We're gonna try.
We're going all the way.
Speaking
Yeah.
of which, if you want to hear the Yul Larson interview, make sure to check out the Masters of Modern podcast.
He's kind of obligated now.
Yeah, he has to. He is Eldrazi obligated to go on
Tuesday.
your
I mean,
show.
we know a guy that knows him. Maybe you could.
Yeah, next Tuesday, Yul Larson.
What can you pay me?
If he's
Yes.
not there, I'll.
Will you pay me?
Wait,
in
you
bur-
know him?
Will you pay me in bursing pods?
Yeah,
I
Why
will
are-
take all your bursing pods.
they're banned.
Not an EDH.
That's true. It's in my Meren deck, right about there. No, I hoped I would pull the deck apart and it would be magically the card. It wasn't.
It's somewhere.
Actually, it was. You guys don't know because you're not here.
That's
I
true.
just did that.
Wow, we are so off the rails. I don't even know what happened. Kessler, what's your Twitter account?
You can find me at Kess Wiley, KESSWYLIE. I'm almost at 666 Twitter followers, guys, and then
You're the devil?
I could be the devil.
Let's
So
take it
let's
past.
make that happen.
Let's make it 667. All right. all
Well,
right.
yeah.
Tell us about your
More the
podcast.
merrier.
Where can we find your podcast?
The podcast is at the MMcast. We are the sister podcast to you guys. We're on rocketjump.com. Also, literally, if you just click that podcast link right above, it'll bring you right to my podcast where
There
me
it
and Ben
is.
talk about sweet modern stuff, brews, top 10 lists. We're going to be doing a run of having every top 8 competitor in the Modern Pro Tour that speaks English, hopefully.
Nice. You should get a couple that don't as well.
We were debating it. We had this guy who does MTG Tutor, which is another podcast that interviews pros, and he was talking about how he got someone that doesn't speak English on once, and he had a translator literally on the podcast.
Wow.
And I was like, maybe you can edit it so you have that translator and that person like over each other, like they
You
do
definitely
on the
could.
National
That's-
Geographic
yeah,
channel.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So maybe if someone knows a pro that top 8s and is a translator, let's make it happen.
Wait, do you want the pro to be the translator?
No, I want the listener
Oh, you want the listener to be a translator
and then be friends with the pro. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a-
That's
it's a-
synergy.
yeah,
That's
it's a-
synergy
That
right
is
there.
synergy. All right, our editor for the show is Terry Robertson, and special thanks, of course, to Geoffrey Palmer for the living card animations. We have full videos for every single episode, thanks to Terry's great work. You can check out Geoffrey Palmer's animations at Living Cards MTG, and you can also watch our video podcast at youtube.com/The Command Zone Podcast. Not to mention, we have Kitchen Table Fables, a web series, live action Magic the Gathering. It's a lot of fun, and it's funny. It features the professor from Tulare Community College, and that's about it.
Oh, have you guys been watching his like Planeswalker cosplay series?
They're amazing.
because they're really good.
Office
great.
hours.
Office
like,
hours,
like
yeah.
I'm going to make a Dak Faden cosplay for GPLA.
You would be great for that.
and I'm going to because I totally because he's the only one I look like, but
Hey, you
because he
never-
looks like Aladdin, and I look like Aladdin.
You
It's
can do
really
whatever
just
you can do
synergy.
whatever you want. It's Magic
Yeah.
the Gathering.
Well, I don't want to find sideburns to pull Gideon off. Also, armor
already
is
did
hard.
Gideon.
I
Armor
have
is
like
tough.
I'm just gonna repurpose my Star-Lord trench coat for Dak's trench coat.
Look
It's
forward
easy.
to that at
All right,
GPLA. See you guys there.
All right, everybody. Thanks for
Bye,
listening.
guys.
Bye. See you next time.
Peace.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter at JFWong and at Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.